Listen, real talk. You know what I've been thinking about since the Knicks won the championship, which, by the way, no one can stop talking about it. And before I get into what I'm about to say next, I just want to say that I had a special episode planned today about, a regular episode about the internet and, how we all came into age with the World Wide Web and pretty much us being the ones who shaped the way the online world is used, especially in its infancy, right? Our generation in the 90s had a lot to do with how the internet was molded and shaped for the future. But I had that in there. Then I was like, wait a second. The Knicks just won the championship. And I kind of started reminiscing a lot about what was going on in the past when I was a kid, specifically when it came to like basketball and sports in general, right? But like I was saying, the Knicks win the championship, right? And I'm thinking, and I'm not thinking pretty much about the game anymore because they won. Not thinking about the parade because we all saw it. We all watched how amazing that was to see the Knicks after 50 plus years pretty much just meld the city together, right? I want to talk about what it felt like, as I mentioned before, to be a kid, right? Watching sports in the 90s, like specifically what it actually felt like. Because sports meant something back then. It was so much more different than what it is today. All right. The way we watch, the way we cared, the way a game on a like normal weekday night, right, in the middle of April could have the whole neighborhood talking the next morning. Basically, because it was pretty much appointment television at that point. Okay. It's not like what you have today where if you miss it, you could just rewatch it or pick it up on your favorite app. No. Sports back then were appointment television. You watched the Yankees, whether it was on your local television a channel or if it was on cable, if you had, lucky enough to afford cable. You watched the Knicks, you watched the Rangers, you watched the Devils. For me, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, so anytime that they played, a lot of the time they were the national game of the week, so I was very, very happy to see them play. Or whenever they played the Giants, which was 2 times a year because I grew up in Jersey, right? I was able to see my team play. And then we took that and translated into something even further. We watched it, we talked about it. We were so excited seeing our favorite players play and trying to, pretty much imitate everything that they were doing. So, we went out into the streets, right? We did. And we played street football. We played basketball at our local courts or wherever we can find an open court. We played baseball on the street, stickball, wiffle ball, whatever it was. If we had to sneak into baseball fields, we did. But that's how we handled that business, okay? Because kids who, like ourselves that are listening to this, who grew up in the 90s, okay? Especially, like I mentioned before, in the inner city or in the New York City area, right? In the 5 boroughs, we just didn't watch the sports, all right? We played the sports every day after school, on weekends, all summer, whatever the season was, that's what was happening on the block, as I mentioned before, all right? You just play basketball until you literally couldn't move anymore. All right. We played football in the empty parking lots. Okay. Until our moms called us back home. That was our childhood in the 90s. That was peak 90s. And right now, the Knicks winning it all for the first time in 53 years. I keep thinking about what that would have meant to the kids who grew up watching these teams, because they were very close in 94 and 99, but they just, they didn't get over the hump. So that's what we're going to do today. That's what we're going to talk about today, the sports and how they impact us in the 90s. Welcome to In Case I Missed It. And let's get to it. Let's talk sports. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to In Case I Missed It, 90s edition. I'm your host, if you don't already know, Alex. And this is how we're going to do it today, all right? But before we get into sports, quick thing on last week. We did the 90s summer. We talked about the quarter juices, dehydration until you were seeing spots and falling over, and just continuing. We didn't care. The bike rides, our parents still don't know about the sandwiches that we ate that just tasted so much differently after spending the entire day doing whatever the hell we were doing, whether it was on a sprinkler, on a, what was it called? The slip and slides or whatever, you know, they just tasted better. They hit the spot. And then, you know, I gave you the afternoon nap. Like, you needed it. Now, the response for that episode was incredible. You know, people reaching out to me, talking to me about certain things, and just it like melded everyone together, right? And that's it right there. That's the whole point of doing this, right? We go back, we listen, you know, and we reminisce. But today is different, okay? As I mentioned before, I had something planned with the internet, as I mentioned on top of the show, but I pivoted because the story of New York sports and New Jersey sports in the 90s, or your local sports, right? Wherever you grew up, wherever you're listening to this, right? And the experience of growing up, watching and playing sports in the 90s, that story deserves its own time, right? We're going to talk about some of the greatest teams that I got to see play, okay, that the city ever had. We're going to talk about what it meant to grow up as a sports kid in the tri-state area. You know, a lot of you will be able to pretty much, you know, agree with me. I mean, sports is sports, right? No matter where you grew up. And we're going to talk about like wiffle ball, handball, stickball, street basketball, whatever, street football, all the games that built us before we even knew that they were building us, right? So listen, let's just get right to it, all right? Let me start, like I mentioned before, the Knicks, because I literally cannot start anywhere else right now. Everyone's feeling the same feels. Everyone in New York is on cloud nine. And I'll be honest with you, I growing up in Jersey, I was never really a fan of the Nets. I never like sat there and said, oh, I got to go watch a Nets game. Most of my family live in Midtown Manhattan. Some others lived in Brooklyn. And I was, spending a lot of time in the city. And my older cousins were Knicks fans. So I gravitated to being a Knicks fan. I had the blue hat with the logo, as everyone did. I had the cheap version of it just because, it was handed down. And not to mention, it's funny now I look back, my high school colors were blue and orange. So how apropos. I wouldn't say that I'm the biggest Knicks fan in the world because I lived, breathed, and loved basketball when I was a kid. I think it was after I joined the Marine Corps in 2001 that I kind of just like fell out of all the sports, right? Except for football and baseball. I kind of just like wasn't paying a lot. And the Knicks teams were not that good either, man. They were not good at all. So I just stayed away from basketball for a while. But the game has a way of speaking to you and bringing you back, So, as I mentioned before, the Knicks just won the NBA championship, first time since 1973. And I keep thinking, bro, what would that have meant to us if we were kids and they would have won that championship? Because growing up in New York, for me, I don't know, you can tell me in the comments when I post these videos up where you guys grew up and what you felt and what your local teams were. But the New York area in the 90s and being a Yankee fan, Knicks fan, all of that was a very specific experience. It wasn't easy, right? Because the teams were crazy, right? Basketball back then was not what it is today, right? It was very physical. Everyone has something to say. Everyone was either a Boston fan, a Laker fan, a Philly fan. This is from what I remember. Or a Bulls fan. Lots of Bulls fans. Everybody fell in love with the Bulls. The Bulls just had the 90s in a chokehold. But those Knicks teams that I'm talking about, the teams from like 92, 93, 94 through 99, they were everything to our generation, right? of everyone growing up in the tri-state area and in New Jersey. You either loved them or you hated them, depending, like I mentioned before, on what city you were from and where you were watching from. Because, those teams, man, they were very physical, like crazy physical. You guys seen the footage. You guys seen all the highlights. You guys seen the Last Dance with the Bulls, right? The Bad Boys with the Pistons, right? They play defense the way that kind of makes you feel bad for other teams, right? Specifically like the Knicks themselves. They were slow, grinding it out, hard fouls. Every possession was like a whole ass event. And I remember this, man, because as I started getting back into basketball in the mid 2000s, I remember like, wait, whatever happened to just elbowing someone in the mouth as they're running through the paint? And then I was told, like, yeah, we don't do that anymore. And I was like, shit. Excuse the language. By the way, the Garden back then during those playoff runs, man, MSG in the 90s during a playoff series was one of the loudest buildings in professional sports. Still is. I don't think people appreciate that enough, though, back then. That building was alive and well. Even when the Knicks were bad, I think that Knicks fans are just very passionate. The first time they really broke through and got to the finals was in 94. And look, this is going to get talked about a lot right now because it's because of the current championship. But the 94 season, that was special because the Knicks hadn't been there since 1973. And back then, that was 21 years without a finals. If that doesn't make you feel old when you think about it. In 1994, a 21-year drought would have taken you back to 73. When I think 21 years back now, no. No. Still 73. I'm not thinking about it. All right. And this team fought their way there, by the way, by being the toughest, most defensive, most physically imposing team in the East back then. Again, they beat the Bulls in the second round, which was massive because the Bulls had won 3 straight championships and Jordan had just retired, which is pretty much, the reason why so many other teams just had chances. But beating the Bulls that year meant something. It meant that the team was for real. All right. And they were. All right. They went 7 games against Houston in the finals. That's big, man. And they lost. And if you watch that final game, if you remember where you were, that's one of those nights where sports teaches you something about life that nobody else can teach you. I've gone through it many years being a Dallas Cowboy fan, pretty much every year. See, the way that Knicks fans felt about the Knicks in the last 20 years, right, is the same way I think I feel about my Cowboys now. It's been 30 years since they last, 30 odd years since they last been to a championship game, even made it out of the first round. It's crazy. All right. The lesson here is that sometimes things don't work out. All right. The way you need them to, but you got to toughen up, man. That's sports. All right. Because you just come back next year anyway. The team just continues to go. Us as fans, we just sit here and suffer. I think the team just has a better chance of moving on than we do. I don't know why, but that's just the way I feel. But now I want to stop here for a second, though. All right, let me just stop here for a second because there's something about 1994 that I think perfectly captures what the 90s were like in terms of how we actually watched and experienced sports. Because Game 7 of the 94 finals drew somewhere around 28 million viewers, right? It's actually the highest rated Game 7 in NBA Finals history, I think. Game 7. 28 million people. Talk about appointment television. Watching one basketball game on a Wednesday night in June. All right. Let me put that into context for you. The 99 NBA Finals, which we're going, to talk about, drew about 16 million viewers for the whole series. That's still a lot of people, but it's noticeably less than what we had on a single game in 94. All right. Now, if we fast forward to 2026, the finals here that just happened, it averaged about 20 million viewers across the whole series. The clinching game peaked at 33 million or something like that. So right now, the Knicks winning it all with the whole country talking about it. The numbers are right back up around where 1994 was, maybe even higher on that single peak number. But here's the thing that gets me about 94. All right, 28 million people. I keep on repeating that. You see, because there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, there were no group chats, no second screens. You weren't watching the game on your phone. You weren't checking your timeline. You weren't refreshing highlights. You see, we all just sat there and watched the game. Full attention, undivided. 28 million doing the same thing at the same time, watching, hoping, yelling at the TV with no way to process it except to actually feel what was coming out of that television. That's what sports was like for us in the 90s. You couldn't scroll away from the moment. You were just in the moment, completely in it. And I think about that number, right? I think about that 28 million and what it says about how different the attention was then. We gave things our whole attention. The whole country locked in on one game. No notifications, pulling people out of it. We were freaking locked in. That's a feeling that's really hard to get back. And then in 1999, okay? So if 1994 was the heartbreak season, 1999 was the season no one can fully explain, and I love it for that reason. Okay? First, you have to know the context. The 1999 season was shortened by a lockout. Let's go back that far. All right, only 50 games. The team was banged up. They barely made the playoffs. 8 seed. I believe it was the 8 seed. The absolute last team in the Eastern Conference to qualify for the postseason. And their first round opponent was the Miami Heat, which was the number 1 seed. Nobody thought the Knicks were doing anything in those playoffs. Like legitimately nobody. This was a see you next year situation for a lot of people. Except New York. Okay? They take the Heat to 5 games, the season on the line. Down by 1 with under 5 seconds left. Allen Houston gets the ball. One-handed floater. The ball hits the back of the rim and bounces in. They won the series. They being New York. The whole city lost his mind. I remember going to school and just talking about it. What is that? I was a junior when this all went down in high school. I remember all of us just going to school the next morning or whatever it was and just talking about it. Just everyone in the lunchroom. Everyone just had, a newspaper. Yes, newspaper. Yeah, we had those. Okay. And then they swept Atlanta. Then they beat Indiana to get to the finals. And even after losing their best player to injury in that series and New York, being the 8th seed, became the first 8th seed in NBA history at that point to make it to the finals. All right? First ever. And they lost to San Antonio in 5 games. But it's okay because, we all know what happened. We all know what happened. Okay? Which we just kind of have to sit with. But here's what I think about when I think about that team. They didn't care. They genuinely did not care that they weren't supposed to be there. All right? They just kept winning game after game. In buildings where everyone had already counted them out, they just kept showing up. And there's something about that I think was very specifically New York about it, right? And the way that we grew up back then in the tri-state area, following our favorite teams. That particular kind of like stubborn belief in yourself even when nobody else believes in you, you can't make that up. Those 1999 New York team had it. And every kid who grew up watching them get to where they were absorbed that. And we in turn, we were walking around with that swag. All right. That if a team, because we all watch sports, we all were like in it. That if the team that we were following and loved did something like that, that any of us could actually do the same thing. And while the Knicks were putting us through the emotional Olympics, so to say, we had another team in the tri-state area that was just killing it back then. I want to talk about the Yankees. All right, the Yankees were out there just winning. All right. And I do mean like winning. All right. I was young. I loved the Yankees. I was a huge Don Mattingly fan. I came to the United States in 1989, but while living in Puerto Rico, they still played Yankee games on television, and everyone spoke about the New York Yankees. Again, another team that hadn't had one in years, I think since like the 80s, 80, 81 or 82, I don't remember. But yeah, all right, at that point. It's a long time ago. A team that dominated. You think about what they did in the 90s and the players that they had in there. Man, as a kid, I was over the moon every time I saw a superstar join the team. And even those that weren't superstars just kind of contributing in a way that, made the team that much better. And as I mentioned before, I was living in Puerto Rico for a bit. We took a break from living here in the United States and flew back to Puerto Rico. I had all my friends that I remember that I left behind when I first left. They were still there. And also, it's all we can talk about. It was incredible. All right. The late 90s Yankees were a freaking dynasty. Not a run, not a good stretch. They were a dynasty. 4 championships in 5 years. We're talking 96, 98, 99, 2000. We're talking about my entirety of my high school life. Okay. I got into high school in the fall of 96, September of 96. All right. And growing up in the New Jersey, New York area, the Yankees were everywhere. You couldn't be from here, there, whatever. I'm not there anymore, but I'll still say here and not have an opinion on them. You either loved them or you were wrong. I'm just being honest with you, right? The 98 team in particular, I'll say this, every time it comes up for the rest of my life, might be the greatest baseball team ever put together. They won 114 games in a regular season. All right. Think about that. They went through the playoffs like it wasn't like nothing, like it wasn't even a challenge. And what those teams gave to a generation of kids wasn't just championships, right? It was a picture of what it looks like when everything just freaking clicks. When the pitching is right, the lineup is right, the defense is right, and everyone plays their role and nobody's bigger than the team. Okay? That's what the 90s Yankees were. And growing up watching that, especially if you were around, my age back then, 13, 12, 14, 11, that became your standard for what professional sports was supposed to look like. I played baseball, and I specifically played first base because I love Don Mattingly. Obviously, he left the team. Then we had Tino Martinez join the team. So my second favorite player on the team was Bernie Williams, another Boricua, another Puerto Rican. So, I wanted to play outfield because he played outfield as well. It made everything that followed, right, a little bit harder to appreciate, after the 90s, because that was a really, really high bar that they set. Okay. And I can't do a 90s New York, New Jersey sports episode without talking about the Rangers and the Devils, right? Again, this is from my perspective, from where I grew up. So I'm giving you guys my point of view. I would hope that you guys would tell me your point of view and what teams you guys watched and who you rooted for, right? Because in 1994, the same year that the Knicks went to the finals, the New York Rangers had ended a 54-year drought and won the Stanley Cup. 54 years. That wasn't a slump. That's like a different era entirely. And they won it. They won it at the Garden. You know what that team gave the city that year, alongside with the Knicks going to the finals, was just an extraordinary amount of sports joy, all crammed into one big spring. Man, it's all we talked about. I believe I was what, sixth or seventh grade? Oh man, what a time. I don't know how many cities have had two teams in championship series in the same year, but 1994 was a hot one. It was everything. In Jersey, where I lived, you had the Devils. The Devils were hot too, man. They were winning 95, 2000, 2003, three championships in 9 years. One of the most consistent winning organizations in professional sports during that decade, man. I mean, talk about the East Coast just being on fire. All right. Growing up in New York, New Jersey area in the 90s meant you were surrounded by winning and greatness, like genuinely surrounded, champions everywhere you looked. And that grew on you, because you looked at it as like, man, like you see your favorites, you see Bernie, Messier, you see Starks, all these people who played really hard, right, to get to where they were going. And you wanted to be like them. Jeter, everyone wanted to be like Jeter. I remember one of my close friends was just like, he had the batting stance down like Jeter, like everything to the T. I was more of a fan, since I was more of a fan of Mattingly. I remember doing the Mattingly stance where he would put the bat flat on his shoulder. Just, I wanted to hit a home run in the ninth inning to win it all. Like I wanted to be like them. It was crazy. Okay, we didn't know how good we had it. And actually, you never do, right? You never know that you're living in those really good old days. That's the kind of the whole thing about being young, right? You just don't appreciate it. But here's where I really want to spend a little bit more time on, because all the watching, all the games, all the championships, that stuff was incredible. But what it inspired on the streets, that's the stuff I think about the most. Growing up, in a city like this, in an inner city or around the city in the 90s, the way sports worked was you watched it at night and you played it the next day. Simple as that. Okay. Watch tonight and you play tomorrow, over and over for your entire childhood. And the games we played, look, we didn't need facilities, as I mentioned before. We didn't need organized leagues. We didn't need parents driving us somewhere. We just needed a ball and somewhere to play. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen the movie The Sandlot. That movie inspired me to become a writer and a filmmaker and just tell stories, because that's the very first film I saw ever in my life in the theater. It became everything. It became who I am today. That's it. Plain and simple. All right. So if you remember what that movie was like, and how they portrayed childhood, playing baseball, playing whatever sport, just doing it. That's what life was really like for us too. Okay. Obviously basketball was the most available sport, because all you really needed was a hoop, and there was basketball courts popping up everywhere. If you weren't playing a basketball court in the school, we were playing by the basketball court by the, by the EMS station. We were playing basketball on the Hudson River, like literally. Like, I grew up playing in courts that overlooked New York City. Think about that. That was life back then. You think about it now, these people who live there, like they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to live there. We're paying whatever. Well, not we, our parents. Okay. So maybe $700 to rent a 2-3 bedroom apartment. Now I saw that that single apartment alone, which we were paying $750 a month for, overlooking New York City, it went for $1.2 million. The apartment alone. I think the whole building was like $6 million. All they had was 3 apartments and a basement. And it wasn't that big. Let's continue on here. The hoops in the inner city neighborhoods, man, in the 90s, they came in every configuration you can imagine, bro. proper courts with painted lines, as I mentioned before, and everything. Parks with one hoop where you had to call which side you were shooting on. Whatever, you played in driveways, alleys, whatever. If a hoop was attached to something, to any surface, we had access to it, we were playing. Didn't matter, right? You showed up and you played with whoever was there. Half court when the numbers were small, full court when enough people showed up. 21 when everyone wanted to play for themselves and somebody was always feeling a little too confident. I remember that, man. Like those cocky MFers out there, man, who just like, they thought they were like hot-ish. Boy, sometimes you had to put them in their place. I was a tall too. I was tall. I mean, I'm 6'5" now. I was tall then. Nobody was like towering over me. And I remember just like blocking people in their face, man. What a great feeling. I can't do that now. My back hurts. All right. And here's the thing about pickup basketball, by the way, that I think is really specific to that era. There were no referees, by the way. So not like you called your own fouls. Okay. And if you decided to be the one to call the first foul or call too many self fouls where like, oh, that's a foul. That's a foul. You would get laughed at all the time, man. There were players that called everything, every ball, every basket, everything. And we just like looked at them like, bro, again, are you serious right now, bro? And what that meant was every single game, right, always had arguments going on, which was okay. That was just the way it was, right? You were either arguing that was in or it wasn't. You fouled me. I barely touched you. You know, you're screaming out, that's my ball. How is it your ball? You start, getting each other's faces, a little push here, a little shove there. But it was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing that we just all figured out. Nobody's parent was coming over. No coach was going to sort it out. It was just you and the guys in the court working it out right there. And sometimes the girls could hoop. Okay. And somehow, the game always continued. The argument would reach whatever conclusion it reached, and the ball would get checked up and the game would just go on. That's probably the most important thing. Those basketball games kind of taught us how to be in a disagreement with someone, work it out, and keep playing together. That's a life skill, right? But we just called it basketball. We just did what we had to do. All right. We also played wiffle ball. Wiffle ball on the block was a religion, man. You had to negotiate what we were going to do and where we were going to play. A lot of the times we played in parking lots, man. Always. All right. We're trying to figure out what was first base, what was second. If we were stealing, if we weren't stealing. What happened if you hit a parked car? Ground rule doubles, unless it hits the windshield. I don't know, man. We were just making stuff up as we went. We knew what a home run was. We were smashing tennis balls against buildings, right? Then we were asking ourselves, what if it goes into the neighbor's yard? Like we hated, there was always a neighbor who hated us playing. And we always knew the ball was going to go into their yard, right? So if you freaking found a way to get the ball into that yard, man, that was an automatic out. And also you had to go get it really fast before they saw you, right? Every single time we played, there was new rules added, If you moved to a new location to play, again, local rules, you just made up what you wanted to and you kept on going. That's it, right? The wiffle ball or a tennis ball, the plastic bat, if you couldn't get, like you didn't want to play with, a lot of us didn't want to play with a wood bat in the street. So we just played with that wiffle bat, man. And it still could hit the damn freaking tennis ball far as hell, right? We had a rule. We used to have meters. Remember, meters, right? So we played in a parking lot. Each parking space had a meter, right? And we chose the meter to be the strike zone, basically. So the meter, right? You have the top of the meter where you put the quarter in, you twist it. That's a ball. If you hit that, that's a ball. But the pole that comes down, if you hit that, that's a strike. And somehow, some way, man, I had a really nasty, weird looking curveball with that tennis ball. The way I was able to make a curve that would just go in and then boom, curve and hit the middle of that pole, I would piss people off. They were like, you got to stop throwing it like that. How can I stop throwing it like that? It's striking you out, bro. Get over yourself. Listen, if you ever saw what happens when someone grips, right, that ball, right, and throws it, right, and make it do weird stuff, all right? And then, you just you released it at the perfect time. That ball starts looking absolutely hittable, right? Then all of a sudden, like I mentioned before, you're like thinking, man, that's your pitch, and just falls off the table. It goes somewhere that doesn't exist, onto that damn, perfectly into that damn freaking metal pole. And I love the way that you hear the ding as the freaking tennis ball hits the pole. That's how you know, bro. You're like, hey, you didn't swing. You out. If you swing and miss, that's it. You're out. I embarrassed you. But if you don't swing and it hits that metal pole, I'm going to laugh at you. And you're not going to like it. Listen, everyone on the block reacts immediately, right? Like, everyone that was playing or watching, they're like, oh, you would hear that, ooh, someone would say something, right? And I think that's the fun part. You just rolled with it. That was just a great time. One of my older cousin, who unfortunately passed away in 2015. He was like my older brother to me. He was the first person I ever met when I first got here to the United States. I stayed with him and my aunt until we got our apartment. Like, he was 13 years old when I first met him, and he took me everywhere, man. He took me under his wing, and I got emotional talking about him because I just passed 43 years old, right? And he died at 43, and that hurt. That hurt me a lot. And just to think about how I grew up with him, and he was the first one to kind of like take me under his wing and show me the ropes when I moved to Jersey and teach me things that I never knew. Man, he was everything, man. Anyway, one of the things that he taught me was handball. Everyone played handball. My uncles, my dad, everyone played handball, man. I really don't think handball gets enough credit. All right, that's like a tough game. All right, like if you grew up in New York or New Jersey, you know what handball is. People still play it today. All right, a small rubber blue ball, your hand. That's the sport. That was it. Okay, and it was everywhere. I think it still is. You can still find people playing it all the time. Every school had a handball wall. We figured it out, whether it was the side of a store or the school itself. Every apartment building, if you had a flat wall, it was a potential handball court. You just needed some space against a surface, and you were playing. The game itself had a real strategy, though. All right, where you aimed, where you went high, when you went low, the kill shot, the one aimed at the very bottom of the wall, so the ball barely gets up at all. All right, and the other person had no chance. You guys also remember like a variation of that, wallsies. You guys remember that? You would grab the ball and throw it up against a wall as hard as you could, right? And you let it bounce, and someone had to catch it. Not you. Someone else had to catch it. Like, you would just get out of the way, unless it hit you. If it hit you, you had to run, touch the wall, say wallsy before someone picked that ball up and beamed the shit out of you with it. Okay, but if someone else missed, everyone was always rushing to that ball to beam that person before they got to the wall and scream wallsies. A lot of people went home with marks all over their back and their body. All right. But back to handball though. All right. The kill shot in handball was the signature move. When you hit a clean kill and the ball died right at the wall while your opponent watched it with absolutely nothing they can do about it. That was satisfying as hell. I watched a lot of the old folks back then play handball all the time. It was one of my favorite things. It was right behind my house. There was an old warehouse, and it was just torn down, right? Nobody was really using, and everyone would go play handball there. And man, I would just watch it, blah, 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 back and forth, man. The hierarchy of that wall was real. If you were the best player at a wall, everyone knew it. You didn't have to announce it, all right? Your game alone announced it. You'd step up to the wall, and the game would start, and within about 3 exchanges, everyone watching knew exactly where you stood if you were that damn good. And that was honest. That was the whole thing, man. The wall didn't care about anything except whether you could play, and so did everyone waiting to get up there. And everyone had like a special glove too when they played. Like, everyone was just adjusting their gloves so that, you wouldn't hurt the palm of your hand. And for completeness, because, I think that like, I don't want to leave things out, right? A lot of us also played when we didn't have the chance to play like wallsies or anything like that. Like we would go play stoop ball, bouncing the ball off the steps of a building and scoring points based on where it landed, right? The point of the step was the key spot. A clean hit off the point sent it flying, and that was the whole game right there, right? Just like playing stickball. I grew up playing stickball in Puerto Rico, came to the States, continued playing stickball. Any type of broom handle, whatever, and a rubber ball. Bounce pitching off the asphalt. If you remember, you would bounce it off the asphalt and then smash it, right? The pitcher bounces it, and you have to time your swing if you had enough kids playing, all right? It always had some type of unpredictable freaking bounce. You just smashed the hell out. God, do kids still play like this? Do kids still go out and play like this? I gotta ask. If you guys are listening to this, and leave a comment, or should I say, tell me in the reviews, are people still playing games like this? Because I miss it, man. And none of these games had instruction manuals, by the way. Like now you look stuff up online, like how do you do this? Back then, you just watched the old folk play and you mimic what they were doing. No, you learned by just showing up, watching, and asking questions. That's it. Right? And figuring the rest out by yourself. And that process, the watching, the figuring it out, the getting it wrong a few times before you got it right, that process was the whole education right there. All right? And here's the thing about all of this that just stays with me, right? When you're a kid watching, all the sports teams, whether it was the Yankees, the Mets, the Giants, the Jets, the Knicks, the Rangers, right? 96, right, was when the WNBA came around too, like whatever, watching those teams, right, specifically like the ones that you knew had no business being where they were at and go all the way to the finals or the World Series or whatever, you would just, the next day you would just go outside, right, playing with your friends, and you brought that energy with you. You wanted to emulate them. Not consciously. Nobody's sitting there thinking, I'm going to embody the spirit of said team that you are watching. You just go out and play. But sometimes that energy transfers. The belief that you can compete even when you're not supposed to be there. The willingness to just keep showing up even when things don't go your way. And you kind of translated that too if you played in high school. You played in teams in high school or in the Babe Ruth League or whatever, right? The understanding that the game isn't over until it's actually over. That stuff gets absorbed, especially when you're young and the sports you're watching feels like it's your whole world because that's what you wrapped yourself around. And like as I mentioned before, growing up in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey in the 90s with the Yankees, the Knicks, the Rangers, the Devils, all doing things, meant we were constantly watching teams that modeled something in us on how we should express and do things as well. That showed us what it looked like to compete at a high level. Our coaches beat that into us. Our coaches taught us that. Our coaches wanted us to mimic that, to play through adversity, to keep showing up. And then, we went outside and we did our version of it, or you went on, played with your team and you showed off like that as well, on whatever court or wall or street, whatever, with whatever you had, you just did it. The combination, of what we watched and then what we played, that made us who we are as sports fans, as competitors, specifically in that time period. And now, right now, with, specifically with New York finally winning it all, right? There's something about it that feels like the whole thing has come full circle. It's made a lot of people feel like that part of their life is back. What they fell in love with as kids, it paid off now that you're older, right? We watched those teams. We loved those teams. We played like those teams. We carried those memories. You know, specifically for the basketball team, right? For New York, you carried that for 30 years, and you got to see it finish. And that's why so many people are emotional, because you carried a piece of when you were young into now as an adult, and it kind of all just blends together. It all comes together. It really does. Before we get out of here, as always, I like doing this little segment where, the Did You Know Though segment, a few things today that are going to hit a little different, right? I like to just throw some stuff out there at you. Number one, we already talked about the 94 and the 28 million viewers for Game 7 of the finals. But here's the full picture that makes that number even more interesting. When the Knicks went back to the finals in 99, that series drew about 16 million, as we spoke about, which is a big drop. And there are reasons for it. The season had been shortened by a lockout. The series itself wasn't particularly exciting basketball. The teams involved, at that time, Knicks and Spurs, they were defensive-minded, slow-paced, great basketball, but not exactly the most casual, viewer-friendly product, right? As it is today. There's a lot of offense now in today's basketball, right? Everyone could shoot a three, no matter how big or small you are, because last week, right? The Knicks and Spurs, again, first finals in 27 years for the Knicks. The series averaged about 20 million viewers. The clinching game peaked at 33 million. So in terms of pure numbers, the 2026 series actually tracked right back up towards the 94 levels, especially that peak of 33 million right at the end. That's actually higher than what Game 7 drew back in 94. But the key difference between then and now is that in 94, 28 million people watching one game meant 28 million people with nowhere else to freaking be. No second screens, right? We mentioned this. No phone, no social media. It was just you, the TV, and the game. Now 20 or 30 million are watching, and you're tweeting about it, you're texting group chats, and you're watching highlights before the game even ends. We consume more, but we do feel it, but I guess the question is, do we actually feel it the same way as we would have in 94, or 99? We don't know. But I know that in 94, 28 million people sat in front of their TV for 2.5 hours and gave the game everything they had. That's the difference, right? That's a different kind of attention. And I think about what it meant to grow up in a time when we gave things that kind of attention, whether it was sports, music, TV shows, movies. We just showed up for things fully because there was nothing else pulling us away. Now let's talk about number two. Let's talk about, did you know number two here? In 1999, Knicks are still the 8th seed, right? In NBA history, the only 8th seed to reach the finals. 27 years, nobody has done it since. Nobody has come close to doing it since. In a sport where the playoffs are designed for the best teams to advance, where the 1 seed has home court in every round, one team of guys who weren't supposed to be there just decided that they were going. And they went. That run still stands alone after all this time. Allen Houston's shot against Miami in Game 5, crazy, just crazy. That shot sent them on their way. I think every kid in the New York area remembers where they were. If you were a fan, watching that shot go in. That's what great sports moments do. They become part of your life, right? A before and after. Let's go to Did You Know number 3. Let's talk about Mark Messier. I mess up his name. Mark Messier's guaranteed before Game 6 of the 94 Eastern Conference Finals against New Jersey, when the Rangers were down 3-2 and facing elimination. They went to the newspaper intentionally. He called the reporters, gave them the quote, "We will win tonight." Front page of the New York Post. Morning of the game. He wanted his team to see it. He wanted the other team to see it. He wanted every person in the building to know what he was saying and that it was going to happen. And then he scored 3 goals in the third period to lead the comeback. That's not a sports story. That's a lesson in what belief actually looks like when someone has it all the way. Not, we'll try our best. Not, we're confident. That dude came out there and said, we are going to win tonight. Okay? And they won. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Guys, that was episode 6. And look, I want to say something real before I let you go today. The sports we watched in the 90s gave us something, not just memories of great teams, something more than that. The Knicks going back-to-back finals, the Yankees winning 4 times in 5 years, the Rangers ending their drought, the Devils right there behind them too. All of that, all those winning teams, all those moments, all those games, they showed us what it was, what it looks like to keep competing, not to give up, to believe in something, even when the evidence isn't there yet. And the games were played out there, okay? The games that we specifically played out there. The wiffle ball rules that we made up, the handball walls we claimed, the basketball arguments we settled ourselves, those gave us pretty much the practice, the actual lived-in experience of competing, of losing and coming back, of working things out without a referee because there wasn't one. The pros showed us the standard and the streets gave us the practice. And here we are, adults now, still watching, still caring, still feeling it the same way we did as kids. I'm still waiting for my Dallas Cowboys. I will guarantee you I will cry and weep like a baby when they win. Okay? A lot more now than when I was a kid. Because we understand what it means for a city to wait 53 years, or in my case, 30 plus years, and finally get what it was waiting for. And I mean, with the Dallas Cowboys, Also the Yankees. Last time they won was in 2009. What the hell are they doing? We grew up watching those 90s teams. We held on to that. We're still holding on to it. And this week, finally, well, the city got a big one. It got its answer. Do me a favor, 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if this episode took you back somewhere today. If it unlocked even one memory, go leave it right now. Take your 30 seconds and share this one with whoever you watched those teams with, whoever argued those calls with you on the courts, whoever was there for the Allen Houston shot, whoever suffered through the 94 finals with you. Send it to them. Let's talk about it. But now that we're gonna correct course, because next week we're going inside the computer room, right? To the sound that every single person who was a kid in the 90s still has memories about, okay? That modem, man, that modem was something else. It was loud, it was proud, and it got you online, all right? I mentioned it last week. We pivoted for this week, but we're going back to it now. Next week, we're going to talk about the early internet, AOL chat rooms, instant messenger, away messages, GeoCities, ICQ, Napster, H-sex location, ASLs. You remember that? The first time most of America went online, and genuinely nobody understood what they were walking into. So come back next week. We're going to be here. I'm Alex, and as always, in case I missed it, the 90s were better. See you next week.